Hey, everybody, and welcome back to AP Live World History Modern. Before I introduce you to our special guest tonight, I want to make one brief announcement. For the next 2 days, we'll be hosting the AP Live World History class at the regularly scheduled time so students can focus on reviewing course content and preparing for exams. Masterclass interviews will be aired at a separate time. As always, these courses are optional. All right, everybody, it's Thursday and it's 5 o'clock, at least in the central time zone. Remember, if it's not 5 o'clock where you are, then you're not testing at 1 p.m. And so you need to make sure you know your time zone so that you know what time you take the AP World History test on what day? May 21st. I'm here today. I'm wearing green instead of red for maybe the first time this whole time because I'm celebrating the AP World History read and the time we had in Salt Lake City. And I'm here with two extraordinary special guests. So let me introduce to you, first of all, Dr. Jody Eastberg. Wave at all the kids out there, Jody. This is Dr. Jody Eastberg from Alverno College in Milwaukee. If you were here on Tuesday, you already met Dr. Eastberg. But she is the director for research. She is the director of the Research Center for Women and Girls at her college. And she's an expert in not just world history, but also Chinese history and women's history in particular. I'm especially excited to have her here today because she is most known to us as the chief reader. That means in terms of world history, she is the #1 person, the most important person. She makes all the decisions, and it's up to her exactly how the scoring goes. So she figures out exactly how your DBQs are scored. That's quite a weight on your shoulder, isn't it, Jody?
It's one that I enjoy.
Good. Well, we're excited to have you here with us today, Jody. Before we get started, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. You know, I was always under the impression that AP readers were high school teachers, but you don't teach in a high school. You actually teach in a college.
True.
Why is it that you are involved with a high school program then?
Yeah, so I'm really proud to be part of the AP program, and most of that has to do with, like you talk about the reading and working with these extraordinary high school teachers and extraordinary students across really the nation and the world. So I'm involved because I love world history. I love world history teachers and the community. But the College Board's really interested in making sure that colleges accept AP credits. And so as part of that, it's important that the test and the curriculum be led by college professors so that we make sure that there's a real synergy between what's happening in high school classrooms and college classrooms. So myself, and then also a lot of other college leaders and liaisons across the country are involved in this process and working on the curriculum, working on the test development, just to make sure there's that alignment and to make sure that these are college courses, which they are.
Awesome. Thanks, Jody. I want to introduce you guys to one more extraordinary guest today. One I'm especially excited to introduce you to because if you've been watching from the beginning, you know that there's been a little bit of a rivalry between me and Mr. Logereau. We're both Texans, but he's from a city outside of Austin. He's not from Austin, guys, okay? He's from a city outside of Austin, and I'm from Dallas, and so Miss Amy Wheeler is here once and for all to make the definitive statement about which place is better in Texas, because I have with us here today Assistant Chief Reader Amy Wheeler, a fellow Dallasite, a teacher from Bishop Lynch High School in Dallas, Texas, and a state championship softball coach. How's it going today, Amy?
It is great. Thank you for having me. And Dallas is the best, no question.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Logereau, I hope you're watching, and I hope you have some tissues nearby. Okay, so Amy, how long have you been a reader with world history?
I've been a reader for 15 years.
Wow.
Started out just regular reader and worked my way up.
That's me. I'm just a regular reader, everybody.
but you know, that's where you really learn so much, and you do it because you love the students and you want them to be able to score the very best they can. So it really is our goal to give every single essay the best read, and you know, it's just what we like to do. It's our nerd camp.
Yes. Okay. I love how you talk about how you want kids to be successful and do well on the test. And I think that's so important because I think sometimes when we think about who's grading our tests, we see maybe some angry person who's got a red pen and they just want to bleed red ink all over our papers. And we want kids to know that's not the case. We're there to make sure, we want to make sure that they're earning the points, but we want them to get every point they earn, don't we?
We do. We really know this is their first draft, and behind every essay, there is a student, and it could be our student, and we want to make sure that they get the most fair assessment of what they've written.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you, each of you ladies, one question before we dig into yesterday's DBQ. And it's a very simple question. Everybody who's watching this video is interested in being successful on the AP World History test that they're taking when? May 21st? At what time? 1 o'clock Central Time or whatever time zone you live in. So my one question for both of you is, what's the number one tip that you want to give students that they can do in the next 2 weeks to be successful on that test?
I'll go first. I think back to when I took AP exams as a high school student at South Point High School in Tucson, Arizona. Go Lancers. We practiced. So between now and the next 2 weeks, just get yourself a timer and start writing. And then a couple other things. My teacher gave me almonds to take into the test. So make sure you've got your protein and that your mind's ready to work. And I know I only was supposed to do one, but please hit submit.
Yes.
Submit.
Yes.
Perfect.
We want to read your essays. We're excited.
Yes.
Awesome.
I would say practice with the timer, so you get used to that time crunch, and really work on and focus on what you know how to do well. Don't try to do everything, because you can score a lot of points without trying to do everything. So just do what you know how to do well.
Awesome. All right. Well, students, before we get started in today's lesson, I want to encourage you to have 2 things in front of you. The first thing I want to encourage you to have in front of you is the documents and prompt from yesterday. Remember, you can find those by checking in the link in the description below. Hopefully, also yesterday, you actually did the work and wrote a DBQ. So I really encourage you to have your own response, your own essay that you wrote yesterday or whenever you wrote it, and have that in front of you so that you can compare our answers to your answers and see how you did. Remember, we're just giving you some possible ways to approach this DBQ, not every right answer. So if you have questions, please contact your own AP World History teacher and ask them for feedback on your responses. All right, so ladies, today we're going to take a little bit of time looking at yesterday's DBQ, but before that, I want to go over a quick tip that I have for students in getting into the DBQ. I encourage my own students to approach the DBQ with this acronym, UBOW. UBOW is a way for students to remember the steps of good pre-writing, the things that you want to do in the first 10 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes of the of your 45 minutes that you have for this DBQ. So the U stands for understand the prompt. Understanding the prompt is absolutely the key to success in the AP World History DBQ. If you watched on Tuesday, the other assistant chief reader, Bill, actually said that the prompt is supreme. A lot of teachers, actually, I'll ask Amy and Jody and see if they've heard this. Have you ever heard the alternative meaning of AP? Okay, well, we should have previewed this in our prep game, but it just came to me. A lot of times teachers say AP doesn't mean advanced placement, it means answer the prompt. Focus on the prompt. You have to focus on the prompt. That's how you guys know we don't pre-plan too much here. So let's take a minute and look at this prompt. If you're looking at this prompt, I think that you should key in on the most important word of this prompt, which is the word changed. The word changed is the key word of this prompt because everything you write has to be focused on changes. What your claims are going to represent is they're going to represent changes, specifically how Christianity changed Latin America in the period 1500 to 1800. So your answers, your thesis, all of the evidence that you provide, it needs to be focused on changes created by Christianity in Latin America. After that, I suggest that you brainstorm everything you can think of on the topic, and then read the documents. When you read the documents, I suggest you cross out things that cross-reference your brainstorm. If you do that, the information you have left will be evidence beyond the document. You can take those facts that you did not find in the document and hopefully find a way to support your claims. Finally, you want to organize your thoughts according to the prompt. And most importantly, you want to get to writing. Don't spend 45 minutes planning because I can only read, Amy can only read, and Jody can only read what you submit to us. We can't grade your planning. So get to the W, everybody. Don't spend too much time planning. So Amy and Jody, do either of you have any tips or tricks that can help students in preparing and doing their prep work, or do you want to comment on this prompt in and of itself?
Well, I think, Bill gave some good advice on Tuesday, which is really, to break the prompt down into its components. So I really like that you highlighted change. The other things that I would highlight here are Christianity. What do you know about Christianity? And also Latin American societies, 1500 to 1800. So there's a lot of course content you can work with there and things that you've learned in your classes. So really getting all of those components out. I really like this idea of doing some planning, and your tip of what the things that are left over after you cross off being outside evidence. That's a great tip.
Awesome. All right, let's get started by playing a game today. We're going to play a game called 0, 1, or 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to read 3 examples of possible opening paragraphs. And in these opening paragraphs, there is a potential of 0 points, 1 point, or 2 points. So Amy, Jody, we're going to start with you, and I'm going to read the paragraph to students. Am I starting with Amy? Am I confusing? Who am I starting with?
I think it's Jody, but I can do it.
Okay,
yeah,
I'll
getting like psyched here. I'm like ready.
I'll start with Jody, and I'm going to read the paragraph. And Jody, you're going to tell me if this paragraph earns students 0, 1, or 2 points on the DBQ, and you're going to explain to me why. Okay?
I'll try.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Paragraph number 1. After the voyages of Christopher Columbus fully connected the Eastern Hemisphere and the Western Hemisphere, Europeans began settling into the Americas and developed new international connections. The Columbian Exchange brought more than just goods to the indigenous people of the Americas. It brought diseases that killed up to 90% of the population, new crops, and even through coerced travel and labor systems, people from Africa. Ultimately, through the settlement of European people, the Columbian Exchange also helped Christianity spread throughout the Americas. In the period 1500 to 1800, Christianity changed societies in Latin America to a significant extent because it led not only to conversions to Christianity, but also forced Native Americans to hide their native religious practice. So, what do you say, Jody? 0, 1, or 2?
I say 2.
Woo! Okay.
Ted, I think this is great because I want people to know this is not necessarily a game format, but this is something we do at the reading. We really test each other to see, are we on standard and can we see where the points are? So this isn't that far off, other than maybe a little more levity, although sometimes there's levity in the process. So thanks for doing this. So 2. Okay, I'm glad that we all.
Which 2 points do you see here?
So I see a really robust context setting happening here. So we're going from, again, the prompt is 1500 to 1800. And we know just before 1500, we have the expansion of European nations into the world and kind of colonial activities happening. And in particular, pointing to Christopher Columbus is pretty clear here. But it wouldn't be enough just to do that. What this student is doing, and what I really like about is that the answer goes from the big picture down to specifically taking us to the moment where the Columbian Exchange is helping Christianity spread as well throughout the Americas. So you have a really clear example of context, big picture to the specific around the prompt. And then I also see the thesis point here. So you have a thesis that addresses specifically 2 different historical areas of analysis around changes in societies, including conversion, among the populations that Europeans are interacting with, and then also the need to hide indigenous practices in these areas as well. So that's
Awesome. Thank you so much, Judy. I want to point out to students a special tip or trick that you can use here. Notice that this thesis is not an extraordinary, elaborate thesis in terms of vocabulary or phrasing. As a matter of fact, this student has stolen large chunks of phrases directly from the prompt. And that is actually an extraordinary idea and something I recommend all of the students to do. As a matter of fact, I tell my students all the time, when you're writing a thesis, steal the words from the prompt and add the answers. Steal the words from the prompt and add the answers. Do it every single time, because that's going to help you focus on the ideas of the prompt. And as Bill said Tuesday, and we've already said today, the prompt is supreme. All right, Amy, are you ready?
I am. I would like to add one thing
Oh,
what
please.
you just said. I really agree with that, because sometimes when students try to change the words of the prompt, they give it a new meaning. So that is really good, just to stick to the words and answer it.
And then they have a beautiful essay that we can't give any points to because it's not about the prompt.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay. All right, Amy, it's your turn now. The question is 0, 1, or 2. Okay, I'm going to read to you now. The Protestant Reformation changed the world forever, especially the world of Christianity. After many people rejected Catholicism for various reform movements, new branches of Christianity were created. And often across Europe, there was violence between the many different branches of Christianity. For many Europeans, this religious and political violence was, at least in part, a reason to leave Europe and settle new colonies in America. During the period 1500 to 1800, the arrival of Christianity in the Americas significantly changed indigenous societies in Latin America because it led to the development of syncretic cultures. What say you, Amy? 0, 1, or 2?
I would give it a 1 for
a 1.
Thesis. Yes.
Okay, so you're giving it thesis and not context.
Yes.
All right.
So the context, this is a really good example of a student that would need to write more. They're not there yet. They haven't quite connected the context to what the prompt is asking about. So they're almost there. They would just need to write more. For the thesis.
So can I pause for just a second and point something out to our students? So I want to point out to you guys that there's a key step to context. And Jody talked about the first student doing it well. And Amy talked about this student needing to do it. And that means connecting to the prompt.
Yes.
Context has to connect to the idea of Christianity in Latin America. If it's not connected specifically to the prompt, you're not going to get the point. So I want all the students to remember that. It's context connects to the prompt. All right, Amy, tell us about this thesis.
It's a good thesis. You clearly see a change. And so the change they're talking about is the development of syncretic cultures. So you have a good line of reasoning and a historical argument being made. It's very good.
Awesome. So I have a question. The last thesis had 2 lines of 2 claims in it. This one only has 1 claim in it. Do I have to have a certain number of claims in my thesis? Does it matter? Is there a rule about that?
There isn't. You want to try to answer the question. So sometimes some prompts do seem to ask for 2 types of claims. If it's asking, for example, for a comparison. So what happened in one place versus what happened in another place. So you might need to really pay attention. That's where that prompt is supreme. But ultimately, even in a question like that, there could be one effective claim that really is able to get at that question. So there's no rule other than you need to answer the prompt.
Awesome. So I would take this as an opportunity to remind students that just like we talked about with using 5 documents or trying source analysis as many times as you can, the more you can do in the period, in the 45-minute time you have, the better off you are. Because if you offer multiple claims and one of them is a mistake, but there's a good claim, you still make a strong claim, then you can earn the point. So I want students to remember to try, if you see multiple claims, to provide multiple claims, because it's going to give you the better chance of being successful on the AP World History test.
I just wanted to say one other thing about this, and that is that this prompt uses the word societies, and sometimes there are words like politics, economies, etc. Those things do matter. So
Yes.
Societies is really broad, so you can really include a lot of different things in societies, really communities or how groups of people come together. But that's something else to kind of pay attention to, that we're hoping to get an answer to the actual prompt that we've asked you to answer.
Absolutely. That's a great thing to point out, guys. If this said politics instead of societies, we would need to speak specifically about things regarding government and power. So that's a great point. All right, Jody, this one's coming to you.
Okay.
And we're going to look at this and give it a 0, a 1, or a 2. By the 16th century, Europeans had begun using their advanced maritime and military capabilities to travel across oceans and build large empires. While these empires took different forms, such as Portuguese trading post empire in the Indian Ocean or Spanish state expansion in the Americas, the Europeans brought more than technology. They brought their cultures and customs, especially Christianity. During the period 1500 to 1800, Christianity brought many various changes to the societies of Latin America. All right, Jody, what say you, Chief Reader? 0, 1, or 2?
I'm going to say 1 on this.
Another 1. Okay, what did we do well? What did the student do well? And what did this student mess up?
Okay, so what I see in this example is a really clear context setting piece. So they talk not just about 16th century Europeans and their maritime and military capabilities, but they talk specifically about how their ability to move around the world allows them to bring their culture to places. So it goes from, again, the broad kind of big picture context to the specific of how it relates to this question. Unfortunately, the level of specificity for the student and their thesis drops off at the end, where it says, during the period 1500 to 1800, Christianity brought many various changes to the societies of Latin America. So I appreciate that the student acknowledges that a change or changes have happened, but as a reader, I don't know what those are. And so there isn't a clear enough line of reasoning that's been established. I'd need various, that word various, it doesn't tell me what you know or where you're headed.
Okay. Yeah, so other words like many, what can we think of other synonyms of various that students should watch out for?
Lots.
Lots, yeah.
Several. Yeah.
So many, several. If you use a word like that, you guys, you better give us some examples. By the way, if you don't use a word like that, you still better give us some examples, because that's the point of a thesis.
I'm sorry.
No, please.
What I tell my students is that if you haven't given some kind of specific example in there with some explanatory evidence, you need to keep writing. And so for various changes, I would always ask them such as, and make them give me a specific example.
Excellent. Okay, so we played 0, 1, or 2. We're going to switch over to another game. Now we're going to play a game called Would You Rather. And the point of this game is to look at some document analysis and figure out which statement does a better job of supporting the claim. So we've taken here some claims that we used in our some successful claims from our thesis statements, and I'm going to ask you, Amy, which student attempt to support the claim using the document is successful. The claim we're looking at here is that Native Americans had to hide their native religious practice. So let's look at attempt A. In a guide meant to help Catholic priests, Jacinto de la Serna explained that in places further from main towns, native religious practices were common, but hidden away from Spanish view. He says the natives take holy sacraments and worship Jesus because it will help hide their native practices. Attempt B says, Jacinto de la Serna wrote a manuscript to aid priests working among the Amerindian population of Mexico, which said the principal teachers of idolatry continued to spill their venom and persuade the people. So Amy, would you rather attempt A or attempt B?
I think attempt A is better.
Woo-woo!
Yes. So what I like from attempt A is how they did a really good job describing the document, but they described it in a way that it's explaining how they hid their native religious practices. So it says, but hidden from Spanish view. And then the last sentence there where it says, it will help hide their native practices. So that does a really good job tying it back to the claim and supporting the argument. For attempt B, what they did here is a common mistake that students make where they're just quoting without any explanation. And so one thing you want to make sure you do is put things in your own words so that the reader knows that you understand what the document's saying.
Okay. Yeah. So the second document does a good job of, or all it does is just restate what's in the document. It doesn't point back to that claim. And
Right.
that's what's so important, is that it has to point back to that claim.
Correct.
Okay, Jody, it's your turn. We're going to play the same game, Would You Rather? But this time we're going to switch it up a little bit, and we're going to look at two different documents and toward the same claim. Are you ready? All right. This claim is the claim that says that Christianity changed Latin American societies because it led to the development of syncretic cultures. Attempt A, student attempt A. Document 2 described how many native peoples continued to practice animal sacrifice and other traditional rituals while also adopting Christian practices, illustrating that most significant change that Christianity introduced in Latin American societies was the emergence of syncretic religions. Attempt B says, in the statue in document 3 shows syncretic belief because it was made by slaves and freemen, which shows the mixing of beliefs between Christianity and the beliefs of Africans in America. Okay, Jody, which student attempt would you rather?
I find this is a tough one for me. I think it's A. And part of that is that so did that go okay? Did I get it?
Sorry, yes.
Okay. I got like a little nervous there. I was like, uh-oh.
I was so caught into listening to your explanation, I forgot to celebrate your answer.
Thank you. But okay, so what I see here is a student who not only describes what they see in the document, but they also directly point to the practices which they think illustrate the syncretic nature of what's going on in Latin America. So it's very explicit, it's very direct. It not only accurately describes what the source is saying and what they think they're observing, as well as kind of places it within the argument. The second attempt, I would call this like so close, right? Like it's so close. So the statue itself is a good example of syncretism. So I appreciate that the student has kind of placed that document in a great place. And I also really appreciate that the students trying to get at interpreting those visual documents, which I know sometimes can cause, some consternation for students, that they can be really challenging. So the issue here is that I don't think, as it stands right now, that we have enough information. Just because someone has made a statue doesn't mean necessarily that it reflects a practice or a worship. So I would just want to know a little bit more about what they understand about the meaning of the statue, where it came from, how it's being used, something like that, that would support those actual syncretic practices.
So do you think if this student had included the fact that it was an African saint holding Jesus, showing different cultures venerating the Christian part, a key aspect of Christianity, if they had taken that little step further, do you think that this would accurately support this claim?
I think so. Yeah. And even just if they had mentioned that in this case, the slaves and free persons, the persons who were enslaved and the persons who were free, were actually using it as a veneration object and hadn't just created it, again, it's so close.
Okay.
It's so close.
I have one more question for you, Jody, because this student made a mistake, and I'm concerned whether or not this mistake keeps the student from earning the point. The statue and this document that we're referring is not document 3 at all. This is actually found in document 4. So if the student inaccurately cites the document, are they going to lose the opportunity to earn the point if they did a good job?
That's a great question. And I think I just demonstrated how much after 15 years I have internalized a rule, which is that while we are humans, and so you really want to try not to do this, I urge you to try to be accurate with your identification, but I read past something like that. What I have internalized as a reader and as a chief reader are the documents themselves. I've practiced, I've read them over and over again, I've studied them, I understand them deeply. You know, we take, again, weeks to develop our understanding before the reading of how these documents might be interpreted. So at that point, like, I know what they are, I know what they're talking about. So a student mislabeling isn't going to be, you know, we're not going to deduct a point for that. What it can do, though, is it can confuse the reader. So you want to try not to do it.
Yeah.
But you would still get the point. That's not the problem.
And the principle behind that is the idea that students, everybody at the reading knows you get one draft and you don't get any opportunity to edit or proofread. And so we're not going to punish you for mistakes that could have been fixed in editing or proofreading. We're here to grade your analysis, your ability to make and support a claim, and look at the different nuances of that claim. All right.
This is another good reason, Chad, just if I can mention one more thing.
Please.
Sometimes students will just say documents 1, 2, and 3 do this, documents 4, 5, and 6 do this. That's not what we're actually looking for. We're looking for you to show us in your words what your interpretation is. So your points are actually going to come out of your description of the document, not whether or not you can list the number.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful point. Okay. Are you girls ready for a new game?
Yes.
You know, I shouldn't say something like, are you girls? Because you're both my boss. And so, but you know, I am also
I look
a Texan.
down when you say it, so you don't have
All right, let's play a game called What Would You Do? And I believe it is Jody's turn. Am I right?
Sure.
I've lost track.
Right,
it's somebody's turn. You guys tell me whose turn it is.
I mean, it's my turn, but she's
Okay.
my boss, so she can go.
It's Amy's turn.
It's Amy's
turn. That's why
Amy's
I have
turn.
to have a minder on this. I'll just keep going.
I know.
I'm
You think
Jody's
I could do a better job of figuring out every other person, but some things are hard. Okay. All right. Amy, we have here document 3, the actual real document 3. And on the right side of the screen, we're looking at the 3 claims that we've already been discussing today. That Christianity changed society in Latin America because it led to conversion. That Christianity changed society in America because it forced Native Americans to hide. And Christianity changed Native America because it led to syncretic religious developments. So Amy, my question for you is, what would you do? Which claim do you think this document best fits into?
Well, the beauty of using documents and writing a DBQ is you can use the documents in so many different ways. I actually love this document. That's why I wanted to do it, because I Googled it because I was fascinated by what happened to her. So I read.
Okay, time out just a second. Students, don't do that. Okay, she
no.
She
Please
did that in preparation, but you guys don't do that. One, you only have 45 minutes. 2, you will have consequences. So please don't do that, everybody.
That was just the nerd historian in me.
Yes.
But the way I would use this, one way you could use it is to support claim 3. The document talks a lot about her cultural beliefs blending with Christianity. And so you could use that to support the claim for number 3 about syncretic culture. So that's one way you could do it.
Okay. What do you think that you could fit it into any of the other claims, or?
You could. The document talked about leading to many. Well, people came about divination, and God told her these things, and so you could also use it to support claim 1. About leading to many conversions. So it's all about how you use it and what part of the document you parse out to support your claim.
Excellent. All right, Jody, now it's your turn. I know for sure this time. Let's look at document 5. Okay. And I want to ask you the same question. We have the same 3 claims here that we've been looking at. And so the question is, what would you do? What claim could you fit this document into?
Yeah, again, this is a really interesting document that can take the students in a couple different directions. So what I really want to encourage students to do is to really work with the words that are given to them and, you know, kind of parse things out. So if you take the first sentence, all were baptized and knew how to say their prayers, which all the boys and unmarried girls had to recite in a chorus near the entrance of the church at dawn. So that sentence, if you look at it, it's describing behaviors that relate to conversion, right? So these are young people who are practicing Christian faith. So you could just, you could take that out, and that would be a good piece of evidence to work with claim 1. And then it says, yet those who are familiar with the place assert that there was little true religion among the Indians. This is not strange in view of the fact that the Indians themselves say there were few Jesuits capable of preaching the gospel. So I think that shows that maybe you could look at claim 2 for sure, that might show that, well, people are maybe pretending to do these rituals. In reality, they're hiding their practices and might have been learning different practices at home. So there would be that tension that would show up there about what was their true belief. And you see that a lot, because that was something that Europeans worried about a lot at this time. And then the third part is kind of interesting. So what it's saying is that these Jesuits who were running this mission were training Indians in the Americas to actually preach sermons themselves in their indigenous languages. And that there was a critique of them about whether or not they actually reflected Christian beliefs. And so I think you could interpret that in a couple different ways. One, you could go with claim 3 and say that something was happening there that was syncretic, where someone coming in from the outside wouldn't necessarily recognize it as a Christian tradition, but actually they're blending together religions. And so it has a very important and authentic syncretic nature to it. The other thing that might be happening here is that the third part of this might be a critique of the Jesuits themselves. And so that's where you might be interpreting it to fit in a claim, but you also could start thinking about this as some sourcing. Like, why is this person so critical of these people who are leading this mission?
Wow. Okay, so you could actually find a way in this document, you could interpret this document to support all 3 of our claims here, which I think is a really good thing to show to our students today, which is that the whole point of the document-based question is that there are several ways to approach every single document, and it's your job as the student to think critically about the document, and you can make the documents work in a way. Well, you can't make the documents work. What I should say is that the documents can support many different understandings about the prompt. And so don't get bogged down in trying to fit a document into a certain puzzle piece, but focus on what you can about the document, and look into the document for different ways to interpret it, because it can actually help you. It's designed to help you with lots of different ways to approach the prompt.
I agree. It's exactly right. We're designing these so that students have multiple opportunities to score these points. So don't get anxious that you haven't I think maybe Amy was saying this at the beginning, like, don't get stressed out about doing everything with this document. Find one really good path forward, maybe 2 would be great. That would show some nuance and something that might get you that complexity point if you're able to show some kind of different ways of interpreting the document. But don't get caught up in like, which one does it fit? As long as it fits and you can show it and you can tell us that, then you're in good shape.
Okay, awesome. I want to make one more piece of advice to every student out there. If you were using all of these claims, I would not necessarily suggest, unless you have extra time, that you try to work it into all of your paragraphs, right? Because how many times can I get a point for using this document? 1, right? If I use it 3 different ways, do I get credit for it all 3 times?
You might.
Well, it might help towards complexity.
Complexity.
But my point is, I'm not going to be able to get 3 check marks for using the document, right?
No, you're not going to get a point each time you use it. I see what you're saying.
So one of the key things to do is to consider that you do have 45 minutes. And even if you come up with 4 different ways to use a document, use it the best way you can and focus on the other tasks that you're assigned. Okay? All right. How about another game, girls? Oh, stop it. How about another game, ladies?
Yay.
Okay.
I just want to mention Alberta College is a women's college. So
how about another game, women? I should use non-gendered terms, because then,
awesome historians will work, or teachers.
Yes. Okay. Brilliant. All right. 2 lies and a truth. This time we're putting a switch on this commonly recognized game. 2 lies and a truth. And Amy, it is your turn.
Okay.
So are you ready, Amy?
I am.
I'm going to read to you 3 statements, and you're going to tell me which one is true or acceptable to earn a point. So This claim is about Native Americans having to hide their native religious practice. Okay, statement number 1. Spanish efforts to bind the native peoples in Mexico to the Christian faith were helped significantly by the emergence of the cult of the Virgin of Guadalupe. According to the story, the Virgin Mary appeared to a Native American man from Mexico, Juan Diego, soon after the Spanish conquest. The church quickly endorsed the story of the Virgin Guadalupe, realizing how important it could be in the process of winning the natives' hearts and minds. Statement number 2. Christians also used a race-based social hierarchy called the castas system and placed indigenous Americans at the bottom of the social structure. And statement number 3. The Spanish Empire under leaders like Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain made the spread of Catholicism a significant part of colonialism. Because religion was backed by the power of the colonial state, local peoples often had to hide their religious traditions or be fearful of state punishment like the rack. All right, Amy, one of these statements is acceptable and 2 of them are not acceptable according to the claim that we're using. What do you think is the right answer?
The acceptable one is number 3.
Okay, number 3. And why do you say that, Amy?
Well, for number 3, so for evidence beyond the doc, you have to give specific evidence and then tie it to the argument that you're making. So you have a lot of specific evidence in here with the names of rulers, Ferdinand and Isabella, how they spread Catholicism and a part of colonialism. And it talked about being backed by this power of the colonial state. And then they tie it to the claim by saying local peoples often had to hide their religious traditions or be fearful of state punishment like the rack. So they do a really good job of giving evidence and then tying it back or making it relevant to an argument that you're making. So that was really good.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about number 2? Why is that not acceptable outside or evidence beyond the document?
So number 2 would not be evidence beyond the doc because it's too vague and it's not relevant to the argument. So you just need more specifics and it has to tie to hiding to their native religious practices.
Okay, I think that's really important for our students who are preparing for the AP World History test, because you guys need to understand that evidence beyond the documents is not called facts beyond the documents. You cannot just provide facts in the same region and expect to earn the point. You have to tie it to your argument. You have to prove the point you're trying to make.
And I like how you've tied it. It's a simple way to do it, but just connecting it using the same phrasing from the claim you're trying to make is sometimes enough of that connection.
Yep, you have to tie it back to the claim. All right, Amy, what's wrong with number 1? That seems like that's the longest one there. Isn't the longest answer always the right answer?
It must be right. No.
Did you guys, I hope you heard Dr. Eastberg's sigh there when I said that.
I know. So example 1 is a really good example of evidence beyond the doc, but it's not relevant to the argument. So this would be better to support an argument about the development of syncretic cultures. That claim, it would be fabulous for that, but it's not relevant to hiding their native religious practices.
Okay, that's an important lesson for students as well. As you're writing, make sure you keep the focus. When you develop a paragraph and you put that claim in your paragraph, hopefully at the first sentence as a topic sentence, when you write your paragraph that way, make sure that you keep in your mind, as you write the whole paragraph, keep in your mind the claim that that paragraph is seeking to prove. You need to have a very narrow focus on the claim that you're making while you're writing that paragraph. Would you agree, Amy?
I agree.
Okay. All right. How about one last game? Do you guys feel cool with that?
Yes.
Ready.
Okay. All right. Awesome historian Jody Eastberg. Which one of these is not like the others? I'm going to read to you 4 student attempts at appropriate analysis, source analysis, and you're going to tell me which one does not match. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. Source analysis for document 1. De la Serna is writing his manuscript to help other priests convert more people to Christianity, which could help explain his skepticism about native practices. In reality, what he describes as deception was likely the development of syncretic religious practices, mixing native customs with Christianity. Source Analysis Document 2. Because de Vargas is giving testimony in court, it is obvious that he is under oath and would definitely tell the real truth during his testimony. This makes it more reliable for the audience. Source Analysis Document 4. Syncretism is defined by some as the migration of a cultural contact between set of cultural traditions and another. Saint Benedict of Palmero was an African Christian who became a saint in Italy and was being venerated in an Afro-Brazilian community in Latin America. Syncretism between African, Latin America, and European traditions are evidenced in this work by presenting an African saint in order to appeal to the community that had formed under Portuguese rule. Source Analysis Document 5. Because de Araza was only visiting Paraguay, he grew up in Spain and thought of Christianity as the only real religion. This probably shaped his negative and dismissive attitudes towards Guarini, calling sermons that likely showed syncretic developments nonsense. Okay, before you tell us your Amy, Dr. Eastberg, I just want to point out that you two have now experienced what students across the country and nation have been experienced since March 25th, which is my extraordinary failure at pronouncing anything other than the name Smith. So now that you guys have experienced what our students have experienced, Dr. Eastberg, which one of these is not like the other?
Well, I think in all of the examples, the students are doing a great thing. So I'm going to start with that, and that's that they're attempting sourcing. So I just want to encourage you, again, identifying that those sort of sourcing perspectives can be really challenging. And the more you try and the more you practice, and I would say the more you try on the exam itself, the more likely you are to get the point. So good on the student who would give us this much source information in an essay. The one that stands out to me that hasn't kind of met the bar for sourcing is Source Analysis Document 2. And again, this is something that's kind of common, and I would rather have the student write it and attempt it than not write it. I'm glad that they made the effort. But in Source Document 2, they make an assumption which isn't, unfortunately, historically defensible, which is that it's obvious that somebody under oath wouldn't lie, you know, like. So I think something you want to think about is I like that they've gone to that. I like that they've gone to the situation that this is testimony in court. I'd just like the student to think a little bit more about what that means. So in fact, someone speaking under oath at this time might be encouraged to kind of speak to a certain truth as opposed to telling maybe an objective opinion of what happened. So
maybe
I
hide
think,
the truth or cover up something.
Yeah, like they're going to have a perspective no matter what. And there's never with these sources, there's never really like just one objective truth that can be pointed to. Like we see there's just such a huge range of perspectives. So I guess, you know, I encourage students to make this attempt, and I'm not disappointed in the student's response, but it doesn't meet the bar of sourcing.
Okay. Do you mind if we go through and talk about the other three and show students some good examples of things that do meet the bar and would, in this case, earn a point for students?
Sure. So what I really like about the first one is that in that example, we know from the source line that this is intended to be sent out to other priests who might be involved in mission work. But I like that there's a discussion of the motivation, that this is about conversion, and that also that this author has a point of view which is biased towards Christianity. And so it might explain that skepticism or the way that he's perceiving those events. So I thought that that was really nice. And it also directly relates to the question that they're trying to answer as well. In document 4, I think this one, you know, again, it's a challenging thing to interpret the sourcing material for works of art. Like, I think that you really need to pay close attention to the information that's been provided in the description of the document that you're given, because a lot of information will be embedded there. But here you have a student who's telling us what they know about syncretism and then trying to set the context around that document. So like, where did this object come from? What's the world in which it's being created? And then also, how is it being used? And I think that that's a great way to approach an object, is think about like, who created it? How's it being used? And that can lead you to some of that contextual information that's really important. And again, they've tied it clearly to this idea of syncretic practices. And then in the fifth document, this is one that's trying to establish a person, their point of view on a particular observation that they're making. And it's saying that at this time, and this is a very accurate observation for a lot of these European observers of other cultures, that they have a very Eurocentric and very kind of focused view of what is right and what is wrong. And so that's really shaping his interpretation of what's happening at this point when he's observing the people that he's interacting with. So I think that kind of gets at document 5. And again, it helps us to understand that perspective that he's coming from at this time.
Awesome. I want to point out to students that, in document 5, this student is focusing on using point of view. In document 4, the student is focusing on using historical situation. But in document 1, the student is kind of focusing on both purpose and intended audience. And I want to remind students that the College Board, in the rubric, we're given historical situation, intended audience, purpose, and point of view. And there are 4 tools that exist as the student in your toolbox. And just like any project, you use whatever tools you need to. If you can get the job done with one tool, use one tool. If you need to mix tools together and use both tools or 2 tools, then that's okay to use those 2 tools. And also, I can use a wrench sometimes, but not actually know exactly what it's called, if it's a monkey wrench or some other kind of wrench. I'm not a handy person. So you don't actually have to tell us the point of view of the author is, or the intended audience of the author is. You just need to be able to accurately and successfully analyze the source and explain its effect on the document, which is the other thing I want to point out for students. Every single one of these successful examples of source analysis has 2 components, 2 steps. There's a description and understanding of the source and who they are, their historical situation, their audience, their purpose, their point of view, but it also explains its impact on the understanding of the document itself. That's critical. You'll never get the sourcing point if you just do step 1. Source analysis is a two-step task. All right, Amy, is there anything that you wanted to say about these 3 successful attempts or the 1 unsuccessful attempt here?
No, you covered it all. When I teach it, I explain to the students the vocabulary that they use to source and describe the document really helps them succeed. So using the adjectives that you put in here, like deception or dismissive, that really helps give more meat to your analysis.
Excellent. That's a really good tip. All right. Well, thank you so much, both Amy and Jody, for being here with us today. I know that the students and the teachers who watch AP Live are extraordinarily thrilled to have your insight and your incredible ideas, because you have given us so much to think about today, and you've given students so many ways to go and take the next 2 weeks and practice and be more successful. So thank you so much to you both for coming in today. I want to give you both a chance to say whatever it is you need to say for students as they go about their next 2 weeks without AP Live in order to get ready for the AP World History test. Amy?
Well, I would like to say thank you to you and Mason, because I've been watching these and y'all have done an excellent job reviewing and working on skills for the students. And I know my students are appreciative of it. So thank you.
Well, thank
but
you.
Also, students, y'all have worked really hard this whole year, and just go in and do your very best. Show us what you know and everything will be okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say Jody. So
Okay. Well, I agree with Amy that I appreciate having the opportunity to kind of engage in this program and all the work that you've been doing. My message to students is we're already really proud of you. You've been working super hard. You've been really going through this material and practicing, and you're studying something that I know the three of us are all really passionate about, and we hope that you've found a love of history through this study this year. So when you get into the exam, just write as much as you can. Tell us what you know. Don't worry about it. If your answer's too long, that's okay. We really want to read your work and give you as many points, as you're able to show us, in your writing. And you're going to do great. There's so many opportunities to get points on the exam this year, and we're going to be reading them and finding ways to support what you know.
awesome. Well, thank you both of you so much for being here. Thank you guys for tuning in and for checking us out. And I hope that you are prepared. Remember that tomorrow at the same time, both Mr. Logereau and I will be together live for the first time to go over last minute tips and tricks, to talk about the actual testing site and the submit button, as Jody so helpfully reminded us at the top of the show. So thank you, everyone, and we can't wait to see you tomorrow. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Thanks.